Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you today. Rob Stewart is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first appearance on Boundless Body Radio on episode 98, which is still one of our most popular and helpful episodes. Rod is the owner of Holistic Health Activation, dedicated to helping people overcome chronic skin and gut related issues. After he personally suffered from dermatitis, rosacea, acne, eczema, digestive issues, depression, and sore joints. After playing baseball here at the University of Utah, go Utes, he was determined to discover the root cause of his issues. His research and personal experimentation led him to a path of healing through the art of self care, cleansing, yoga, fitness, and animal based and carnivore nutrition. He shares his passion and joy on social media, especially Instagram and YouTube, where you can find a ton of helpful content. He is a certified yoga therapist, enjoys all kinds of activities outside in the sun, and brings intention and fun into everything he does. You can also find him at Rob at holistichealthactivation.com. Rob, what an honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, Casey, it's an honor to have me back on. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk shop and connect with people who are similar to you, where we can kind of nerd out and just have a good time and then help some people along the way. So thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. We totally vibed with you last time, and definitely excited to get you back on. This is something that's been in the works for a while. And I actually just messed up the last thing that I said about you in the introduction. I gave your email address and said it as a website. And just so the listener knows, you have both of those. That's totally fine.
Yes, I do have an email and I do have a website. There's one other website that's popped up over the past year. We started a school, an online school, which has been awesome. We have over 300 students already. And it's a 48 video series. We do bi-weekly question and answers. We have a group forum. Everything's private and off social media, so we can talk completely free of any sort of advertisement or anyone trying to censor us in any way. So people can find that at eatcleansemove.com. The kind of intro sales funnels where you can watch some free videos and get a better idea of what we do is at healpsoriasisandeczema.com. So for those of you who are maybe looking to be a part of a group and have a journey for life and have some support and have some fun and some interaction, that's another great place to get connected.
That's amazing. We'll definitely make sure we tag that in the show notes. Doesn't surprise me at all that you're out creating new content and new ways to connect with people. You're just always so great at that. Your content on Instagram, like we said, was fantastic. I do have two gripes for you about your name, though. The first one, the first one is that somebody with your name apparently made a podcast all about Disney, like going to Disney and Disney cruises and like things to check out in the park. And so to find your content, brother, I've got to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll all these Mickey Mouse ear episodes to finally get to your stuff, which is a little frustrating. I know, a little frustrating. And the second thing, I'm sure you get this a lot. Every time I had thought about this episode, a Rod Stewart song gets stuck in my head, and without fail, it's Rhythm of the Heart, which I don't even
Nice.
I don't even really like, and I don't know why that's the one. It wasn't like if you think I'm sexy or something, but that's the one that gets stuck in my head. And I sing it to myself, like, damn it, what? How'd that happen again?
So I will not apologize for number two, because Rod Stewart is awesome in every way, shape, or form. I really wish that my dad is so cool. He's like the best dad ever. But if Rod Stewart was like my surrogate, like art father, I'd be totally cool with that. I might even consider changing my name. One thing people can do that does help, because I had someone else tell me that, and this Disney guy has kind of come out in the last not too long, because there was never an issue before. Anytime you want to find me, Rob Stewart eczema, boom, and most things will pop up number one on Google, or Rob Stewart skin health. So that's one little caveat to help the Google engine do its thing.
That's great. Yeah, I learned that the hard way after a lot of scrolling, so I do appreciate that. I want to deep dive into skin health, obviously, with you today and cover some topics that maybe we skimmed over last time. We can even revisit some of the things we talked about. But before we do, could you just remind our audience kind of your personal story with skin health yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So the Reader's Digest version is, I grew up in San Diego, California, just a super active kid, played a lot of sports, loved to be outside, was, typical rough kid, kind of getting scratches on my skin. Growing up in Southern California, as a redhead, sunburns, red skin, and then also on top of it, having sensitive skin was just kind of something that we felt was quote unquote normal. As I grew up, though, I did always have some form of skin issues. I can remember being 3 years old and rolling down a grassy hill that was soaked with water that we were kind of like trying to make into a slip and slide. and my full body just started itching. And it wasn't this normal type of itch, like a, like a little scratch and you itch it and kind of goes away and it's all good. This was an intense burning, pins and needles, deep itch that just couldn't be satisfied. And it really freaked me out. So I, of course, ran home to my mom. She took me to the doctors. I think they hit me up with penicillin. It went away. And that, I think, was kind of the first red flag that my parents probably should have paid a little more attention to, but they're kind of old school. If you're not broken up and bleeding, you're fine. And that kind of just segued into a lifetime of what we threw under the rug as Rob with his ginger skin that's just sensitive. So, I'd be playing Pop Warner football or Little League baseball and get some type of itchiness on my sternum or in my scalp. And we just ignored it. Fast forward to probably high school, and some of these issues were starting to take a little bit more hold of my body, especially my scalp. I just always had like a dandruffy scalp. And during baseball season, because of when it wasn't the worst, but during football season in the heat of the summer, especially when we first put our helmets and pads on, it was pretty gnarly. I'd get rashes and the itchiness would be unbearable. And then by my senior year, I think my sternum started being pretty much inflamed with eczema and dermatitis. And we just didn't really, again, we didn't diagnose this. We didn't go to any doctors. We didn't really treat it in any way, shape, or form. So leading up to college, it was manageable. It wasn't in any place that was too big of a deal. But again, I always had very sensitive skin, like the type of skin where if I went like that on my forehead, there would be a red mark and maybe even turn into like a blistery scab.
Wow.
And I was an athlete, so I was constantly smashing into people and falling down. So I was always that guy that had the cuts and bruises and little things on my skin, but again, didn't really care. Fast forward to college, where I went to the University of Utah, played baseball, along with being an avid athlete. I turned into an avid partier, which again doesn't help anything out as far as sensitive skin, alcohol, experimentation with different substances, marijuana, the whole 9 yards. And then on top of that, my diet was about as atrocious as it possibly could be. I was that dude who was always lean and muscular, so everything's okay. I'm fit, I'm healthy, doesn't matter what I eat, I'm just lucky. That was dead wrong. So the going from class in the morning or skipping class and getting stoned, and then hitting up the corner store on 12th and University, where I could get the good jalapeno poppers and the fried chicken and the bacon bits and a extra large 32-ounce cherry Coke. That was my like pre-practice ritual. And I didn't feel horrible, but it wasn't serving me at all. And as I kind of continued this, by the time I was a junior in college, I was pretty much starting to have the early effects of systemic skin disease. The T-zone was starting to show some little weird things pop up here and there. I would have these kind of episodes where my chin and my face would just be like dark red, not sunburnt, but almost like a deep facial inflammation, almost like people who have a red face syndrome. And then that kind of crescendoed after I left school in 23, 24, 25. That was when, for me, it became absolutely life-changing, to the point where my face was completely covered in dermatitis and eczema. My scalp was pretty much covered in psoriasis and seb derm. I had some rosacea on my cheeks and on my tip of my nose and on my chin, and all the crux of my elbows and crotch and butt and everywhere else. I had different elements ranging from, again, seb derm, eczema, psoriasis, rosacea. And by the time I was, 26, 27, it had pretty much taken over my life to the point where I was kind of shutting down. I had started to visit doctors and was basically told the same thing by every doctor. There is no natural path to healing these skin diseases. All you really can hope for is some cysts, some relief of symptoms, maybe from the medications. And you're just going to have to come back every 3 months or 2 months. We'll reformulate the medications. We'll put more steroids here, less steroids there, all the way to going to the place of immunosuppressants. When that happened and I saw all of the symptoms just getting worse and worse and worse, and to also have the psychology of working with a doctor who's supposed to be my leader, my helper, the person who's, in charge and kind of making things right, telling me that there's no hope, I was in a pretty dark place, covered in eczema, extremely self-conscious, feeling horrible, and being told by doctors that you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life. Something I should probably back up and mention is I've also had a lifetime of being a trumpet booty, gas, farts, toots, everything I eat. I was the kid that didn't really want to eat. Don't feel, Mom, I don't want breakfasts. Don't feel like eating. Always had some stomach stuff. Not, again, bad enough to really see a doctor, but it was there. And through college, the IBS came, the leaky gut came, the inflamed colon came, the irregular bowel movements came, where I'd have weeks where I'd poop, no joke, 7 times in a day, no problem, and then go a couple of days and just nothing, just nothing coming out. Wow. So the skin was a mess, the digestion was a mess, and by the time I was 25, 26, 27, I was having the arthritis from the psoriasis, psoriatal arthritis in all my joints, and was pretty much a mess and done with doctors. So at that point, I kind of had a light bulb moment where I did realize that I needed to take some full responsibility for, 1, my behaviors, 2, for my own health and my own healing, because I wasn't going to get it from the typical sources. And that's when my journey really began down this beautiful rabbit hole of holistic health and a different version of athletics and adventure than I'd ever experienced beforehand. I first got into Ayurveda, yoga therapy, and that opened up a whole world of all these different things, ranging from Chinese medicine to just good old-fashioned kinesiology, anatomy, biology studies. So at that point, I kind of had an idea that the filtration organs are going to be a major component in this. My digestion is going to be a major component in healing. And I didn't fully understand this yet, but I also had an instinct that if my hormones are off and my body weight and body fat and my strength is all not good, that's probably a place that if I aligned with that and became healthy, strong, and healthy fit and healthy lean, that would probably make a huge impact too. And those 3 things are what I truly focused on. And I stumbled around a little bit. My education process wasn't straightforward. But at some point around age 29, I kind of really got focused. And I said, I'm going to go fully plant-based, and kind of started to try that and would be good for a bit and then maybe stumble into some bad eating. But about a 3 to 5 month period of kind of figuring that out, I kind of lucked into a mindset where I was saying, okay, the line is now drawn in the sand. I've played around, and at least in my head, I have a clear path. And I went full bore. I went deep into cleansing and detoxification. I went really deep into my yoga practice with meditation and physical movement as a way to facilitate all sorts of different changes in my lymph system and my organs and my hormonal structure. And I went strict plant-based, which now I don't really recommend, but at that time it served me really well, because it took me from eating the crap that I just mentioned to basically eating whole foods. And it taught me the discipline to actually day after day eat healthy. So about a year of that, my skin was pretty much healed. My gut health, looking back, I thought was cured at that point, but it was just a major improvement from where it was before. And that is when I started to put out a few videos here and there on the old YouTube. Now at that time, I wasn't really saying, hey, I just cured skin disease and follow me, you can do it too. I was more just like, here's some of the things that I've been playing with and doing, some recipes, some, different poses. And looking back, the videos are hilariously horrible. But that's what kind of started my YouTube journey. Is I basically got a year under my belt of healthy skin, then started putting videos out. And as I put out videos, people started reaching out to me, wanting some coaching. And luckily with my background, personal trainer, yoga therapist, I have the skill set to help people in terms of putting a program together. I also have a degree in behavioral science. I have a master's close to a master's in psychology. And so it all just kind of came together and melded. And now for the past 10 years, I've been working with well over almost 2,500 people at this point. I have a very thriving online school, and I work privately with people one-on-one, helping them naturally heal their skin. Probably a point that I brushed over too is I was vegan, plant-based for about 8 years. And that came to a crashing stop about 5 years ago. I had a traumatic miscarriage with my partner at the time. She had been vegan, and we found out, unknowingly, that her vegan diet had created a really horrible disease called MTFR with a mutated gene, which basically means that your blood sucks and you can't upregulate D vitamins or B vitamins, which obviously are essential for all hormonal functioning. So we lost our baby. She almost died during the pregnancy, and afterwards struggled to regain her health for a full year. And when that happened, my health as a plant-based person had already started a downslope for about 3 years. But because of my platform on YouTube that had grown, because of my indoctrination into what I believe now is a cult, I wasn't able to truly be fully honest with myself and pull myself out of it. It took a tragedy to really wake me up. At that point, I took moral inventory again, like I did 8 years previous. I really looked around at the people who I was surrounded with, and what I was reading, what I was taking in as far as information, what I was believing more so. Then it was very obvious to me that I needed to make a big change. So that's what I did. I started out kind of I would say like a seafood-based keto. And that quickly turned to an animal-based, pretty carnivore within about a month and a half. When I started the animal-based diet, I was about 147 pounds, 150 pounds. I had lost 7 teeth. I had three root canals, endless cavities. My digestion was at a clinically horrible place. I definitely had IBS and leaky gut once again. And 6 months into the carnivore diet, or animal-based is what I prefer the term, I was 35 pounds heavier with less body fat. The parts of my body that were non-existent as a vegan, like my neck, my shoulders, my upper chest, and my arms, despite working out all the time, had blown up, like bigger and stronger than I ever thought was even possible for myself. And that kind of really is where I've been now for the past 5 years. I've been really focusing on trying to create protocols and programs around animal-based eating. And I'm feeling the most amazing health that I've ever had. I'm 42 years old. I'm probably in the best shape of my life compared to even the first 2 years vegan. The lightness in my body, the energy that I have, everything is just so drastically different. And that's basically the Reader's Digest version of my story up to this point.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for sharing that journey. We got to kind of this timeline in the last interview, and I asked you specifically, like, was it terribly difficult for you to leave the vegan community? And frankly, I was very surprised by your answer, which was like, not at all, not even a little bit. And it's so funny, like, if you've done this long enough, you start to get the comments and you get people leaving things on your YouTube. And I'm of the opinion that, like, I want to build bridges. I want to understand somebody. People put carnivore on the far right as one thing, and they put vegan on the far left as this other thing. And I don't think of it that way. I think let's slide those two things to the one side of the scale and say, this is the 2% of people who give a shit and are really eating mindfully, and these are all the other people that are destroying their health, with the standard American diet, whatever. We have a lot in common. And I find that the more I try to reach out to somebody or answer questions, there's no discussion. It's just like, you're stupid, this content sucks, this is really dumb. And it's like, okay, well, what don't you like about it? Like, tell me, like, what's your opinion about things? There's never a conversation. I've tried to be friends with them, they're never friends with me. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that the majority of people, the people in the middle who decide they want to either try carnivore or animal-based or keto or vegan, it's because they're looking to transform themselves or make some positive change. And that's the thing that we all have in common, is we're just trying to find answers. Whether we find the right answer first or not, it doesn't really matter. I think honest people are going to end up kind of near the same spot at some point anyway. But I think there's a point when someone gets indoctrinated into the vegan culture that part of it is, if it's not vegan, it's a piece of crap and there's nothing positive to take from it. And I think that's a major part of their Achilles heel. I haven't found that to be true in the carnivore scene. I mean, when I was first talking to carnivores, I was vegan and they were open arms, like, okay, tell me about your journey. Like, why are you even talking to me? Like, this is interesting. Like, you don't seem like a typical angry vegan that hates humans. And maybe that's because as a vegan, to be totally honest with you, I didn't become vegan to save the planet because I already knew that it doesn't do that. It might be one of the worst things for the planet, to be
That's
honest.
right. That's right.
And I didn't become vegan for the animals because my lineage is farmers and I know what happens in harvest time on kale fields and soybean fields and corn fields. That's a massacre of mammals every time. So I didn't really fall for the propaganda and kind of like the typical save the animals, save the earth type of stuff that most vegans will fall into. And really that hammers into their heart and it's so hard for them to get out of that sometimes. So I was lucky that wasn't me. Also, I have a bit of I'm a Scorpio, so I have a bit of the critic and the judge in me is always kind of there. Most of the time it's pointed back at myself, but when I entered the vegan landscape and I saw people promoting a grape only diet with extremely powerful herbs that destroy your kidneys and livers and touting that as a magic recipe, and a person like that having a huge cult following and people who will literally try to destroy your business if you even debate the person. That was all of vegan culture. All 12 years ago, veganism was basically Durian Ryder, Life Regenerator, Rob Morris, and some of the doctors that are all now dead. And it was a very scary space. It was like fruitarianism, 80-10-10, raw vegan, or you're a piece of crap. And for me, none of that ever jived. And as a vegan, I was always kind of like the dude who would speak on panels or do a podcast or be in a vegan convention, and kind of have a lot of the vegans already didn't like me because I would speak out about it.
Wow.
So for me, the scary part of leaving veganism wasn't my desire to be a part of their culture, because I never was really a part of it anyway. It was more of really confusing the people who followed my platform, because my goal business wise is to help a very singular focus. I want people to realize that eczema is a reversible disease and you do not have to live your rest of your life suffering, period. And so whether that is plant-based or vegan or eating donkey hair, I'm going to try to find the answers, and I'm going to be truthful about it. And it was just the type of thing where I really didn't want to confuse people. And it was just a natural fear. I'd built a huge following and a business around being vegan. And I was ready to accept the fact that, maybe my career in this realm was completely over. And so I just said, you know what, honesty always works. It always has for me. And so I just jumped out with both feet and started to tell my story and was honest. And I did have a huge backlash. But I think this bugs the vegan community more than anything. That's when my popularity in my channel exploded, and I think that has to do a lot with what you were talking about earlier. The carnivore diet, the animal-based diet groups were just so much more open to different messages and different people, that they just opened their arms to me and shared me with their followers. And like a month into my transition, business was booming. My channel was growing like crazy. And I was still working with plant-based people and now animal-based people. And it was like finally this weird hybrid that was just really me. And it was just all based on truth and honesty and experience.
Wow, I absolutely love that. Thanks for going in depth with that, and for taking the courage to do that, because that can be something scary for a lot of people. Let's dive into diet. That's a great place to start. And I wanted to ask you specifically, why is the connection between skin and gut health so strong? I see it all the time. If you have one, you have the other, almost without exception, from what I can tell. Why is that connection so strong?
That's a good question. And I definitely won't give the answer of like, well, you are what you eat, and if your gut's healthy, everything's healthy. I think that's way too ballpark. What I've found, I have a pretty like specific idea of what it is. So skin disease is actually an autonomic nervous system disorder. So it means your fight or flight is pumping cortisone and cortisol for no reason. And it shows up for people with skin disease as these symptoms of the skin, the itchiness, the flakiness, the redness, the open wounds, the oozing, all sorts of different things. Now, the question is, how the heck do you affect the autonomic nervous system? And there's many things, but really you have to go right up the pathology chain, which is from the gut biome to the filtration system, from the filtration system to the hormones, from the hormones to the immune system, from the immune system to the nervous system, and from the nervous system to the autonomic nervous system. So in the most basic terms, the gut health is the entry point to the autonomic nervous system. And along the way, as you're going system by system up the pathology ladder, it crescendos, and in the alchemy of it affects every other thing. So as your gut biome starts to heal and your filtration organs start to work better, your body starts to be able to use the nutrients in a different way and partition them. So then your hormones start to come back. And as your hormones come back, it makes you more virile, more anti-fragile, starts to affect the immune system. Now you're having this whole different perspective and feeling in life, which then causes less stress and less anxiety, which allows you then to sleep better, which then starts to affect your immune system. So it's this cascade of all of these things working together. And honestly, just like I said, the entry point to all of that is diet and gut.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've heard you explain this before, and honestly, I had never thought of it this way until I heard your explanation. I thought it was brilliant. So maybe you can explain the difference. We all have to agree. You can't have your diet be high fat and high carbohydrate. That is not going to work. That's called standard American. Look, go to the mall, like go to the airport. Look at how we're doing on standard American. We're not doing too great. So we got to go one or the other. And you actually helped fix your skin by going very low fat, very high carbohydrate. But there's a difference in the way those two diets work. And hearing you explain this, I thought was fantastic. How one speeds up and one kind of slows down. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of nuance within that. And before I jump into answering your question, we have been, a group of us been doing some research into this, some pretty heavy research experiments with ourselves and clients. And what we're finding is, I think there's two separate things to consider at all times. One is quality of the food, right? Fruit's different than table sugar. I think we all have a pretty good grasp on that. But we also have to look at different macro ranges and what they mean. And when you are talking about low quality foods, your macro ranges will drastically change a human's thing. But what we're finding now with quality foods is that there's a lot more wiggle room. So people like me and Paul Saladino and a few others have gone to a place where we're like, okay, a place that we haven't personally jumped into as healthy people is high sugar, high fat in the same diet. Now, Paul is banging out days of up to 380, 400 grams of fruit carbs per day while eating nothing but animal fats and animal proteins on top of it. So by the nutrition, if he enters this stuff into Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, it's going to be a high carb, high fat diet. And he is thriving like crazy. Now, there's some other factors. He moves his body a ton. He gets out in the sun a lot. He uses the glucose that he eats. He earns his carbs. And his carb sources are absolutely perfectly clean. But in general, what we found is that even from basic clean sources, most people in general do either need to be on the higher end of fats with the carbs very low, or the opposite, the fats quite low and the carbs more elevated. One thing that the vegan community was missing and that I was missing was the thing in the middle that really makes everything work is the protein's got to be super high. If the protein's high, you have the most wiggle room because it's not going to leave enough grams of carbs or grams of fat to negatively affect you. And also the effect that protein has on the blood sugar is amazing. It's such a stable force. And it's such a healing nutrient that has been so demonized. It's like the most demonized nutrient there is. And of course, you do have to blame the vegans for this because they have a full assault about too high of protein and all of these literally fake studies and all these bot studies that mean nothing. But what I found for me is I had success on an extremely high carb system and basically no fat, because it did to me what chemo does to people with cancer. It killed everything, including my libido, including my testosterone. It killed my skin disease, but it left me in a place of being like someone who just had a successful chemo treatment. I didn't have any symptoms, but was I thriving the way that I am now? Absolutely not. And I think that the misconception is that maybe people should start there. And it's like, no, like you can have that same healing effect while thriving hormonally. And I found that cleansing and detoxification, in the way that I was doing it back then with a high carb, low fat diet, was like adding fuel to the fire. It was just scorching me out. So I would consider that like sped everything up, sped healing up, but also maybe overly aggressive. Whereas even if you look at things like heart rate and blood pressure, when you have elevated fats and very low carbohydrates, a lot of alchemy happens in the body that feels slower. You feel more relaxed. You feel like things aren't happening at a breakneck speed. Your mind is actually tuned in. You can articulate your words. You're not so much in a rush anymore. Some of the hyperactivity or twitchiness or just kind of ADD symptoms that a lot of people on high carb diets experience completely goes away. And as far as the detox and cleansing side of it goes, the body thrives on connecting fat to toxins and then pooping them out or peeing them out or sweating them out. Whereas sugar, if you're eating even fruit and some potatoes or sweet potatoes like I was back then, your body's constantly having to kind of clean that out and then clean itself out. So it is a very distinct thing, but I also say stay tuned because we're doing some pretty wild stuff. And I think there's going to be some more information out there. Personally, right now, I do unlimited fruit and unlimited animal products at times. And I have the dysbiosis and the gut stuff when I'm doing that is non-existent. The caveat though is there is a customization process for everyone. And it's kind of finding that those macros that I was talking about that work perfectly for you and knowing what your range is. Because there's going to be people who don't thrive on a high fat diet or a very high fat diet. They just need enough fats. They need enough fats to give them the nutrients that they need to be healthy and hormonal and all that. And they do a little bit better on elevated carbs. And there's the opposite. There's people out there that the carbs are just going to always mess with them no matter how clean the source. So finding out what you are is of the utmost importance as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's the fun part about nutrition, isn't it? When we think we know everything there is to know about nutrition, and we learn all the time that there's other ways of doing things. We refine as we go. And so I absolutely love that process. Certainly, a very strong animal-based or carnivore diet has worked really, really well for me and a lot of my clients, which is great. I do want to ask if somebody chooses to do more of a carnivore style, and especially initially when they're getting rid of some of the carbohydrates, and maybe that's the less appropriate time to include things like a lot of sugar, a lot of fruit, a lot of honey, but knowing you can add that in later on if you like. Where do you put the focus with people? Do you get better skin health results by focusing on fat or focusing on protein?
Probably protein, to be honest with you. The fats, like I said, are extremely important, but with most people, you just have to get the amount of fats that will produce the alchemy that is needed to be healthy, for your brain and for your hormones and for everything else. Also, if you're not getting saturated fats and cholesterol, then you're probably not going to ever get vitamin D from the sun. So you have to get enough fat no matter what. But what I see is the people who don't eat enough protein across the board struggle. But my clients that just undereat their protein or have an aversion to it, they're the hardest ones to figure out that puzzle piece. With the protein high and the fat high, what I've seen comparatively to high carb is that the healing of the biomarkers, meaning your sleep, your testosterone, your sex drive, your ability to articulate words, your overall sense of well-being and your mood, your creativity, your athletic ability skyrocket extremely fast, like faster, like surprisingly fast. Even when I went through it, it was just like, man, I was an athlete my entire life and I'm getting gains like I'm kind of on steroids. And the other hand, high carb, that just doesn't doesn't happen.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're so glad that you prioritize protein. That's something we've definitely learned along the way as well. How do you think about collagen protein as either something that needs to be in the diet or something that needs to be supplemented?
I think for me, I try to be open-minded to everything. And I definitely don't come from the school of I know what's best. I come from the school as I'm got my white belt on and I'm traveling around to different dojos getting my ass kicked so I can learn. And what I've found is kind of across the board with my clients, I steer them away from anything powder, anything related to supplementation, not because it doesn't have its place, but because it's like it's kind of like focusing on trying to throw a curveball before you can pick up baseball. First, pick up the baseball, then be able to throw the baseball, then be able to throw that fastball. Then down the line, the curveball will come. It's kind of more of also what are the behaviors that will take you to where you need to go. And the behaviors are eat animal based, work out daily, sleep well, and get in the sun. And we're going to start there with everybody. Now, does collagen, the nutrient collagen and collagen peptides have a place in healing the skin? Oh, for sure. Definitely. They're one of the most magic nutrients there is for skin health. That's why there's a whole industry built around supplementation of them for sure. But I think getting them from whole food natural sources definitely is the way to go, especially at first. Now let's talk about someone who has been consistent with their diet. They're getting a full spectrum of different animal foods and animal proteins and animal fats, and they're hitting everything, but something's lacking. That's when I will reach for collagen peptides in powder form or pill form, or possibly things like liver supplements or organ meat supplements to round out nutrient profile and allow people to actually get what they need. And also there's a big behavioral component to all of this. Some people at the end of the day just won't be able to eat the great foods all the time. And for those people, supplementation is probably going to be something that they'll have to use as a crutch, and works way better than the alternative.
Yeah, no, that's very well explained. I'm glad you do focus more on the foods and less on the supplementation. We feel exactly the same. I think there's a time and a place for selected supplements, but I want to know why. I want to know what is the reason that you're taking this. Not necessarily I'm taking X, Y, and Z because this is a big multivitamin. It's got 70 different things in it. Like I'm not so much a fan of that. I want to know, can we take a more targeted approach for a specific reason, which I think is great. We talked a little bit about this last time, but I wonder, I know this is very individualized, but generally speaking, what can we say for skin health? These foods are actively beneficial. These are good ones that you want to include. And what foods, in your experience, in your opinion, these are the universally like worst foods for most people that are dealing with skin health?
That's a great one. And it's actually really simple. I would put beef at the very top. I would put egg yolks from pasture raised eggs that are foraging for their own food and not eating any corn or soy at the very top. I would put things like wild caught seafood up at the very top, salmon, and fruit, all that. And I mean, also, to be honest, a quality grass-fed butter can add so much to someone's diet. It's crazy. Things like tallow are foods that, for people who struggle to get their calories in, can really change a person's life hormonally, like drastically. Okay, someone can get their protein in, but at the end of the day, they're only eating 1,500 calories. You start adding some delicious grass-fed butter and salt to everything, and all of a sudden things taste good. The palate picks up, and then also you're getting all of these calorically dense, super good skin health nutrients that make it easy to get enough calories. So just the basics, the animal fats, the animal proteins from ruminant animals that are grass-fed and or eating their natural diet, those are number one. And then I would put, as for carbohydrates, fruit is bomb. Fruit is great. I don't have clients who don't do well on fruit. Just the amount of fruit for an individual is gonna vary. I would love to sit here and say that organ meats are magic. I don't think they are. I think they're great nutrients, but sorry, Liver King. If you just start eating raw heart and raw liver, not much is going to be different than eating a steak or even ground beef, to be honest. Now, I'm not trying to poo-poo any of that. There's great nutrients in liver and heart and all sorts of organ meats. And I think it's great to eat nose to tail as much as you can. But I think that message is going to miss 90% of people out there. There's
I
not
think so
going to
too.
be a soccer mom who's going to go and rip apart a cow and eat a bloody thing. And you know what I mean? That's just not going to happen. So
Yeah.
the basics, the animal fats, the animal proteins, ruminant animals, grass-fed, and fruit. You can't really go wrong there. Now, on the other side, and I want to try to be a little bit more focused, because I think we all know fast food, processed food, that stuff's all horrible. But the hidden dangers are things like seed oils that even by the vegan community are still promoted as health causing. There isn't a seed oil on this planet that does anything except cause major inflammatory disease, period. And anytime you start cooking with any seed oil, it is going to become so toxic that you're really asking for it. So eliminating seed oils, eliminating any form of processed sugar, and I do throw a lot of grains into that category. Beans and legumes, cruciferous vegetables, all don't really have a great effect on the population that I work with. So if we're talking about healthy foods, basically most of the plants, vegetables, anything that is growing out of the ground, with the caveat of root vegetables like squash and sweet potatoes have worked for a huge amount of my clients. Broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, beans, nuts, seeds, generally pretty harsh and bad for the skin health sufferer.
Interesting. Does that have to do with the high oxalate content of those foods?
I think that it could. I think that that could be part of it, but I think it's also just more basic to the point of, everything that's living has the desire to spread its seeds and live more, live longer, procreate, even plants. There's no woo-woo-ness about that. That's their job, to throw their seeds around and grow more plants. Now, you take kale, for example, it doesn't have any teeth to fight. It doesn't have any arms to punch with. It has only one thing to keep itself alive, and that's neurotoxins and plant toxins and things that when animals smell and eat them, they get sick. And plants have, like humans, evolved over thousands of years to be very specific and strong with their neurotoxins. And so each plant has some level of neurotoxicity or some ability to have plant toxins or anti-nutrients, whatever you want to call them, in them. It's just kind of picking the ones that maybe have less or more, and understanding for me that they don't necessarily have a nutritional place for the human. They don't have a need. Like, we don't need greens. We really don't need spinach or kale or any of that. And it's pretty evident to see that when you remove those things from most people's diets and you kind of lean more towards what I talked about, fruits and animal fats and proteins, some things start happening a lot more rapidly.
Yeah, totally. It's such a weird message because we're told those are the superfoods. Those are the best things that we could possibly eat. But those foods, a lot of those foods were not even around 100, 150 years ago, especially in the form that we see them today. Like if you walk through a produce section in the grocery store, those foods are completely different than what we have evolved with. And most of the vegetables, I would argue, weren't even there. I think vegetable eating is extremely, extremely recent. And we have to respect these plants. These plants are smart as shit. They know what they're doing. They've been around a very, very, very long time. And we just have this like really weird, entitled kind of attitude about them that they're just here for our pleasure and we're just going to take all the best parts of them and we can consume them. And that's just not the case. They will fight back.
Yeah, I don't think you could be more right with that. Excuse me. I think a great example of that is the banana, right? So 1,000 years ago, a banana was about this small and was filled with huge black seeds and just disgusting. And through hybridization and people being good botanists, they create a big, chunky, meaty banana with no seeds. And that's a frankenfruit. That's not a heirloom fruit with a normal natural nutrients that when you were to actually eat a banana, it was not something that you really wanted to do. Maybe if you had nothing else and you were starving, maybe, but probably even not then. Now you take that and you compare that to elk. They haven't changed at all. They're the same darn things they've always been. Not any bigger, not any smaller, same nutrients, same stuff. And so in my mind, it's a very obvious thing. Like, I'm going to eat the elk. It's never changed. We've been eating them forever. They're not hybridized. Now, one could make the argument with cows that process has happened, and that's maybe a little bit more nuance of a discussion. But in general, animal fats and proteins are the way they've always been. And I believe that in many ways, humans are the way they've always been and need the same things.
Yeah, I love that. Very well explained. So, for somebody who has been suffering with skin issues, is this something they can go really cold turkey and just jump right in, start eating a carnivore diet, animal-based diet, as you call it? Is it something they can do immediately? Do they need to be more gradual? And on that same note, I'm going to ask also with medications, steroids, all these things that people are given, what's the process of coming off of those things?
It's a great question. I'll tackle the food part first. So I think transitioning on a physical level, I think anyone can basically go from raw vegan to going carnivore, because your body's just going to go, oh, thank you. Like, seriously, thank you. What will happen though is they, because of their indoctrination and their belief system, will freak out, because you go from eating a fruit-based diet or plant-based diet and you're pooping all that fiber out every single day. You're dropping buoys this long several times a day, and that's considered normal. Then you go to a carnivore diet and 4 days just passed and you poop out one little rabbit turd and people are freaking out. And so the psychology of it may be more challenging for people than the actual biology of it. With that said, everyone who I've been working with who's transitioned from vegan to carnivore, who's made a 2-foot jump, has had nothing but a faster transition into their health. As far as people with medications, that's a whole different ball game, I think, because you have withdrawal symptoms, and some of these medications you are literally chemically dependent on. And so I think it is smart to at least consider talking to your doctor on the safest way to come off any of these things. What I did personally, though, is I just went cold turkey. I went cold turkey with the steroids. I went cold turkey with the immunos. I did it all. And that possibly made my healing process a little bit more exaggerated in the beginning, because I was also dealing with withdrawal symptoms. But for me, it was more of a solution oriented, just leave it behind, almost like an alcoholic. With an alcoholic, you're not going to say, okay, well, we're just going to start off lowering the amount of vodka you drink per day until it's down to a reasonable amount, then we'll quit. Like that's never worked once for any alcoholic ever. It just doesn't work that way. And I find to be similar addictive qualities to medications more on the psychological side. So let's take someone who has had eczema their whole life. They start a program with me. 3 months in, all of their biomarkers are doing great, but their skin is still all over the place, which is totally normal. It's very tempting to go to your doctor and get a steroid cream and put it all over your face, and the next day look dramatically different and better. But you really have to fight that urge, because you backtrack so much, and you're starting to really just ruin the exact systems that you're trying to heal. So in many ways, like, as long as you're on medications, and I don't want to sound disrespectful to people who choose to take medications, because it is a personal choice. I respect everyone's choices, but I might go so far as to say that as long as you're on pharmaceutical medications for skin disease, you're probably not going to make any headway, even if your diet's perfect, even if you're cleansing, even if you're doing all the other stuff, because it's interrupting the exact process we're trying to do.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. It was about a year ago. I did a consultation with a neighbor of mine, and I assessed his diet and kind of said, like, look, you should probably just go towards animal products. And I remember making a note that said, like, wife has really bad skin issues, but she doesn't really eat a lot of meat. She wants to stay kind of more vegetarian. I just made a note of it, and I'm not the person that's going to go banging down her door and saying that, you have to be on the carnivore diet, whatever. But she ended up reaching out about a week or two ago and said that she had finally got to a place where the skin was so terrible that she had to do something, and that's what she decided to do. She described, I believe it's called red skin syndrome, which I guess it's pretty self-explanatory, but I had never heard of that specifically. She talked about how the skin, like it would dilate, your blood vessels would dilate and like choke out the nerves, and it was horribly painful, red skin everywhere, all over on her face. She showed me pictures. Dude, at one point she said she was on 12 different steroids, and she could call a doctor and request whatever steroid that she wanted. If she wanted this one, she could make the doctor like write a prescription. And she's had just no energy, horrible existence, all of this pain. And she's done 2.5 weeks on just ground beef and water. And she feels absolutely amazing. It's been such an amazing transformation just to see. She's definitely not out of the woods yet. I think she's got a long recovery process, but you can see it in her skin. There's lightness coming back. That must be something you see all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, especially with the steroid creams, is the longer you use them, you have a better chance all of the time of what's called TSW. It's topical steroid withdrawal. And with topical steroid withdrawal, you're going to have the possibility of getting the red face or red skin syndrome. And it's a mechanism that comes from, with the steroids, it starts to overtake your body's ability to produce the right amount of cortisone to help you, because those hormones are helpful. They help inflammation. They do a lot of good things. But once your body stops producing them in a balanced way and it starts not producing it at all, and then you're getting this crazy amount from the steroid creams, you then have to heal from that as well as the skin disease. Luckily, the same protocol heals both. The same thing that heals the TSW and red skin syndrome is what will heal the eczema or dermatitis in the end. That's the good news. The bad news is, though, if you've been on the steroids for a long time, the journey is definitely a bit longer. And I do see a lot more dramatic things happen in a faster pace when people do decide, okay, I'm going to do beef and salt and water, or just a strict carnivore diet with a plethora of different animal fats and proteins comparatively to anything else.
Yeah, interesting. I love that explanation. One of the cool things when somebody does decide to go down this path for skin health is they notice all the other benefits in other places. We've already talked about the gut, and I see gut healing just as often as I see skin healing, and they seem to go hand in hand. What other things start to sort themselves out when somebody starts on this journey?
That's a great question, and it kind of allows me to be fully vulnerable and transparent. I don't really I care with all my heart about helping people with skin health, but that's not the point of what I do. What I actually do, and what actually really makes my heart just glow, is what seeing people liberated. And what I mean by that is they come to me for healthy skin, or they come to my program and work with my team to get healthy skin. But all of the skills that they learn along the way make them a different human. The discipline, the hormonal health, the cognitive responsibilities of being a balanced human. All of these little things will allow you to have the skill set to do whatever you want in life, whether it's start a business, whether it's to stop the job you hate and have enough energy and strength and mental acuity to go do something else. It gives your body a whole different sensitivity to other people's energy. It can clean up your community. It can clean up your relationships. And truly, when you see someone take control of their diet and lifestyle, everything within the human body is going to have a huge upgrade. I talk about hormones all the time, but really people are like, well, what does that really mean? Like, you have hormones and da, 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 da. Your body is a hormonal machine. It's a hydraulic hormonal machine. And so everything from dopamine to testosterone to GH fuels everything we feel and everything we see and everything we touch. And when I see people's hormones turn on, not only do they just look different physically and have more strength and more stamina and all that, but all of the hormones that make a person balanced and happy are turned on. And that's the more important thing. I don't work out in the morning to get bigger biceps. I don't really give a crap, to be honest. I work out in the morning because at nighttime, I can lay in bed calmly and be very happy and never really have issues with anxiety attacks or panic. None of that. Depression doesn't exist in the world that I live in anymore. And it did used to exist in the world that I lived in. And so that, honestly, that's really what I see that makes me the most happy, is someone who comes to me for eczema and then 5 years later, they have 3 kids and a thriving family, or 5 years later, they've quit their job and they own some thriving business and they're this just genuine happy person. And to me, if you can heal your skin, most likely all that's probably going to happen too.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that part of it too. If for the listener, if you're listening and not watching, watching Rob's face just light up, ear to ear smile is awesome. I can tell you're totally genuine with that. And I'm gonna refer back to this woman at the same kind of thing. She's noticing she has energy. She's now sleeping. She went years without getting a good night's sleep, and now she can sleep. It turns out now that her feet are hurting her because she's actually standing up. She's able to like move around and stand, and her body is getting more used to it. You know, one of her kids was a little fussy while we were meeting and talking, and the patience, the calmness that she had just in talking, just talking it out and giving suggestions, and the kid was fine, and it was really amazing to see. And I wanted to be really mindful of the way I made this next point, because this was certainly my experience, not having any skin issues really, but going on an animal-based carnivore diet. I asked her specifically, have you felt the gratitude yet? And I didn't want to say, like, have you felt more gratitude? I'm talking about the type of gratitude that you can only feel, I believe, when you're eating this certain way. And she got a little choked up, and she said, I don't know what it is. Like, even just today, it feels like it's pouring out of my chest. I feel joyous, were her exact words. And again, I don't know of any other life or lifestyle that leads to that type of feeling. And that's exactly why I asked that question, because with this lifestyle, I see it all the time, and it's wonderful.
It leads you to think that there's a possibility that maybe a balanced, healthy human, the way we're supposed to be, is that.
That's right. That's right. When we are eating the proper human diet, we get to feel the way proper humans should feel: healthy, happy, vibrant, aging and kicking ass, not having the dad bod and adding weight and chronic diseases and medications. We see all of that stuff reversed. And it's it's just one of those things that, like, taking a walk around the neighborhood and listening to birds and like appreciating your body and the way that you can move through life and serving people and helping people. That's it. That's what it is. And it's so amazing. And it sucks for all the people that get to miss out on that, but it's also very hopeful and empowering to know that everybody can start down that path, and you can improve and you can reverse these things.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's something to be said for that for sure. And I've noticed, I definitely mentioned this last time, I think, but each year being animal based, I thought that I'd already hit a plateau the year before, and it kind of just keeps getting better and better and better. For me, the gratitude thing, I thought I had that as a spiritual vegan, right? And it's really only the juxtapose of actually having it that I know now that I didn't even come close to having it. I wanted it, and I felt peaceful, and I was projecting and working towards balance and harmony within myself, but I don't have to try anymore. It's just there. And many people say, well, once you started eating meat, didn't you like lose your connection to like loving animals? And I'm like, absolutely not. I felt as a vegan better then. And now I understand I'm just a part of this cycle, just like the birds and the turkeys and the animals who are all doing the exact same thing. And when I hunt an elk, or when someone gives me an elk that they killed with their hands, and they look that animal in the eye and thank that animal, that one single grown elk is now feeding 10 human individuals who are going to affect hundreds of thousands of other people in a positive way. Like, I don't know the listeners out there, whether they're Christian or they're Jewish or they're Protestant or they're Mormon or they're nothing or they're atheist. But to me, that feels like something bigger and better than me, something grander than I can understand at work. And I feel a part of that now. So when I eat an animal, like, I didn't used to pray when I was vegan before I ate my food. I just ate. And now I literally look at it and I'm like, wow, like this thing gave up its life and now it's providing life energy for me. And I'm going to take that seriously. And it's very transferable. That life force energy goes straight into me, and I'm able to really utilize it to connect and be what I actually want to be. I feel more empathy, more love for nature and animals and other humans, especially now that I've been eating basically meat for 5 years. It's no comparison to when I was vegan. It was no comparison at all.
Yeah, that has certainly been my experience and the experience of so many people that both you and I have had the pleasure of working with. Man, this has been such an amazing and beautiful conversation. I really appreciate your insights. Talking to you always makes me feel just happier and lighter. And I really appreciate that you bring that to the table. You brought that to our listeners today and that you bring that to your clients. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, so on YouTube, as we were kind of discussing before we recorded, there's another Rob Stewart out there who's a big Mickey Mouse fan. So if you just go Rob Stewart Google search, you might find some weird Disney stuff. That's not me, folks. That's not me. I'm sorry. Maybe I need to approach him and see if I can buy his name from him. But
You're not going
on
to teach us about the
YouTube,
Jungle Crows, or you're not going to teach us about like the Haunted Mansion or any of that.
geez, no, not you won't find the Disney content on my channel, but my channel on YouTube, if you just search Rob Stewart, ROBSTUART, and throw anything in there with skin health, eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, you'll find my videos. On the Instagram, I go as Stewart, Rob Stewart. And again, it's pretty easy to find. As far as my websites go, holistichealthactivation.com is how you can find me for one-on-one coaching, consultations, private stuff. And then Heal Psoriasis and Eczema is where you can find the online community / school that I've created. And we're over 300 strong. We do bi-weekly group calls. We have a private forum. We have a 48 video series that outlines the entire healing process, customizing the diet through the biomarker system, hacking your biorhythms, your circadian rhythm, how to gently and sophisticatedly cleanse and detox your filtration organs. And then also there's a lot of compared to my YouTube channel, there's a lot of mindset stuff in the school, the marathon approach, the beginner approach. We really harp, especially in the first 3 weeks, 2 weeks, you have to get your mind right to start this journey, or it could be vicious for you. So yeah, that's where you can find me, those places. Yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on. It's always great to connect with you.
Absolutely. It's really great to connect with you. I'm looking at my list of potential questions and topics that we could cover. We got to maybe half. So maybe another time, if you've got time, we can bring you back on again and cover some of those other things like sunlight and so many other topics that we can really get into. But we're so grateful for you and grateful for your content and that you would take time out of your day to come onto our show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. And I'd absolutely come on anytime you want, man.
Awesome. It's such an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.